starting out with the column on fiscal disparities, and you can see that they're starting to go down a little bit as well as our tax base is it's just leveling off, it's maturing. Our tax capacity, as you can see, we had some pretty large increases in 2006 and 7. It's leveled off, and now this year with the recession, the tax capacity has decreased by 4.5%. And page 15 in the budget book shows some of this information. Page 15, just for clarification, shows the estimated market value, whereas this slide is actually showing the tax capacity. So there's a difference of about 2 digits on there, so just so that everyone is clear on that.
Madam Sort of Mayor?
Mr. Rosbach.
Bob, on the last slide, the percentage of change, that's the percentage of change that has to do with the tax capacity. That doesn't have anything to do with the fiscal disparities part of it.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
It's just the change in the tax capacity.
Thank you.
Next, looking at the past, or the tax levy for years 2008 through 2010. And as you can see, our proposed levy for 2010 is at a total of $16,670,046, which is a 5% increase from the 2009 levy. Looking at the operations portion, that actually reflects a 3.8% increase. The debt service portion reflects a 9.5% increase. Over the past several years, our debt service fund has been reduced. It was plenty high. It's still adequate, but it's not. It's getting down there, and it's something we need to be looking at. And I don't have this capital improvement plan in there, but if you were to look at the tax levy proposed for 2010, it's about $1,200,000, I believe, higher than what we're actually levying. So just I guess advisory that we that's part of the reason why the levy increases. We really do need it for the debt service. And there's in the budget book on page 251 is the statement of revenues and expenditures for the debt service fund, just for your information. You can see that will show you the fund balance on the bottom of that page and how it has decreased over the years. Getting into some of the budget details, our proposed expenditures for 2010 are $55.1 million, of which capital improvements are $13.9 million, largely streets. We also have in there fire truck replacement, and we have some other programs. Operations are at $31.7 million, and debt service is at $9.5 million. And these expenditures are also, if you want to follow along, are also on page 10 in the proposed budget book. Looking at the change, our operations budget is down by a 0.04%. I think it's about $12,000 difference from 2009. Capital improvements is up 34.8%. And that's due to projected parks and trails outlays, fire truck replacement, and street projects. And then lastly, the debt service budget is up about 5.7%. Total budget is up about 8%. But as you can see, that's largely skewed by the capital improvements portion. Moving on to our financing sources, our revenues are at $17,152,643. Charges for services are at $16,481,000. And miscellaneous and all others are at $8,119,666 for a total of $41,753,464. What's not in here would be any bonding that we would be doing for street projects. Also, any drawing down of any reserve balances. So that's why the difference between revenues and expenditures.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Rosbach has a question.
could you speak a little bit more, Bob, about the drawing down of the funds that you were talking about?
Yes, we have over the past couple of years, we've actually drawn down some general fund reserves. We've actually, because of the math, as we've reduced our expenditures by $1.5 million, our policy has been to keep our general fund reserve at 36% of our expenditures. So as you reduce expenditures, it actually frees up some of the general fund reserve, so that at one point I think 2009 we actually will probably finish closer to about 40% of expenditures, but we'll be back at about 36.6% is what we're projecting now at the end of 2010. Does that answer?
And what happens to that money that gets freed up? Where is that? How's that being used?
Oh, it's being used to fund expenditures in the general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Could identify it as making up for some unallotments, for decreases in our revenues, our fees, and so forth. Whatever.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Nephew has a question.
As long as we're doing some questions, one of the things earlier you had the slides about the debt service levy, and so I was looking in that part of the budget book, and one of the things that I'm noticing there is the other financing sources besides the levied portion, I guess, for the debt service budget. And so, just to clarify my understanding of that, this is page 251 in the budget book. There's the 2009 original budget and then the 2009 reestimate. And the big difference between the two is what was originally going to be a transfer from the general fund. And if I recall correctly, was that some of the funds that were in that employee benefits fund that was overfunded originally?
That's correct.
And so from the reestimate, then I take it that means that transfer did not take place as we ran into the unallotment and so forth. Is that how I should interpret that?
Yes, that's also correct. Actually, what we're expecting to be able to do at the end of the year is because of the favorable pricing on the street projects we've done over the past couple of years, we actually do have some bond issues that have excess funds in them. Mm-hmm. And so we will be, at the end of this year, then transferring those funds into the debt service fund. That'll help to bolster that balance a bit and kind of take away that need for any general fund financing of it.
So, okay, so we actually saw then a pretty big drop in the fund balance in the final analysis between 2008 and 2009 in the debt service fund. And then in 2010, does the 2010 budget in that column there include what you're talking about of excess funds and those project funds from bonds?
Those amounts are not reflected in here yet because
okay.
At this point we don't know what they'll be. Could be as much as $2 million, but I'm just not sure until we actually close out projects.
Okay. I guess just looking at the numbers along the bottom and relative to what the typical expenditures are, had our fund balance gotten unusually high as a result of prepayments or things like that? Or, because it seems as though our year-end fund balances are dropping pretty sharply in next year and this year.
To answer that question, I guess that I was expecting that some of it was prepaid special assessments that perhaps we were drawing down on. As you recall, a couple years ago, we had Springstead do a debt study for us. One of the conclusions that they came up with was that we really hadn't been doing that much of that. And actually, well, we'll know more once we get the year end, get the audit results. But last year's audit didn't show that we were collecting more assessments than we were scheduled to do. As you know, as we levy the assessments, they're projected to be collected over a 15-year period for residential, but the homeowners have the option of prepaying them to avoid having them put on their property taxes. And we always anticipate a certain amount of that's going to happen. I don't think it hasn't been a large percentage, and so they're following the schedule.
Okay.
Is that answering your question?
Well, I guess I just overall have some concern about whether our debt service levy is keeping up with with what we need to have to maintain that and to avoid having a sudden spike at some time in the future. And I mean, I can see why last year with this past year with the unallotment hitting us in December, and also then this year again, that would be part of it. But I guess I'm just a little bit kind of raises a red flag for me to see those balances declining like that. But times are tough, and I guess the only way to do anything else about it is to raise the taxes to pay for road projects from several years ago. So, please continue.
All right. Looking at our ambulance fund, we're projecting a 2% increase in the fees for 2010, and that'll be before you during our regular meeting yet tonight. The rates are charged based on recovering costs of operations, while also influenced by the average rates charged by other providers and so on. And a 2% increase will increase our revenues by about $53,000. Ambulance revenues for 2000.
Question, Mr. Nephew.
Mr. Schmidt, the revenue increase, is that a net amount when calculating the level that we actually receive, for instance, from Medicare billing, or is that a gross amount of just a straight increase in revenues?
Councilmember Nephew, that would be a net amount. Because of our changeover to using Transmedic, outsourcing the ambulance billing, they do it a little bit differently than we do, but they get to the same bottom line, and that is net revenues. That's net of any write-offs that are necessitated by Medicare, for instance.
Thank you.
All right, so our ambulance revenues anticipated total $2.7 million. Looking at the Environmental Utility Fund, we are proposing to increase our charges by 7%. As you recall, in the capital improvement plan, the projected statement of revenues in there calls for a 7% increase over each of the next 5 years.